this man. Boo.
Boo this man. Boo. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, don't boo us right now. We'd appreciate it if you don't. This is our sixth season, first episode of the sixth season. We're very excited to be back here in the studios. Alan and his, I am over here in mine. I'm Dustin Bass. It's Alan Wakim. Sixth season. Alan, we've been doing this for freaking 5 years now. Coming this October will be 5 years when we started our first podcast.
5 years, you got it. Seems like it's been 8 or 9, 10. 11.
It feels like an eternity, my friend.
Yeah.
It feels like it's this heavy weight, this burden that I feel like I have to carry all by myself. And there you are off in the distance, like having a beer or sucking on a lollipop.
Why aren't you drinking a beer? I mean, this is, do we really want to be all serious? I have seen some history shows where people are like bloody serious and I'm falling asleep.
I'm so caught up in trying to promo our show, The Sons of History. I'm drinking coffee in the evening time out of one of our Sons of History Come and Take It coffee mugs. So speaking of promotion, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to us wherever you're listening on the podcast, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify. And while you're there, if you can, leave us a nice rating and review. If they go up to 5 stars, feel free. Click that 5 star. Do us a huge favor. And let your friends and family know about us. Let your enemies know about us. Summon the dead. I don't care how you go about it. We're also on YouTube. We're also on X, no longer Twitter. And we're on Facebook and Instagram. So you can find us there. We're doing a lot of work. Alan and I. We're going to get to your article that you recently wrote on the subject that we're going to be talking about, which is about the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer, and all that jazz. But you can find us on the Epoch Times. Just search our names, and you'll find us. Anyways, that's all I got, man. How are you, by the way?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad that we're not recording on Saturdays because that was getting a bit rough.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you, we are going to be recording on Saturdays as well. I know this is a Thursday evening, and we're trying to, leave our weekends open for ourselves and for our guests. We don't want to steal their Saturdays.
No, but the fact that we're not having to do it every single Saturday.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a plus. It's something we should have done a long time ago, but schedules wouldn't allow it. So that's the price you pay when you're just two regular guys that have regular jobs and you have a passion for history. That's it.
And if you want to see us doing this full time, folks, then tell all your friends, like Dustin said, your friends, your enemies, your associates, your customers, just get on bikes, knock on people's doors. Give them pamphlets about, the Sons of History. And
yeah, but make sure you dress up nice. Maybe something like a short-sleeved white shirt, button-down, black tie, something like that.
Yes.
Go around and make sure you identify yourself with maybe a name badge or whatever. All right, dude, let's let's move on. So you watched Oppenheimer, I think a little bit before me. Let's discuss that real quick. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was very well done, from not just the regular cinematography or the cinematic elements and the acting and everything, but I thought the story of what Oppenheimer was sort of going through off to the side with his relationships, which we will discuss. Then also his pursuit of something that you know way more about than I do, the whole nuclear fission and everything, and how to harness that energy into a bomb. And then also just sort of the fallout or the aftermath of having been part of, or sort of the figurehead, the leader of the whole Manhattan Project, and then the dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I thought it was just very well done, and I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. So
yeah, I really enjoyed it. when I went to go visit Los Alamos. Actually, I went to go visit the Trinity site in New Mexico at the White Sands Missile Range, the very spot where the bomb blew up on July 16 in 1945. That very spot, they call it the Trinity site. It's only open 2 days a year. Reason for that is because it's right in the middle of a nuclear, not a nuclear, right in the middle of a missile base. So they practice with missiles. They are in artillery, from my understanding. So I went, and when I was there on April the 1st, I visited the site, and then I went to Los Alamos. And that's where I heard about the movie Oppenheimer. There's a big buzz going on. Oh, there's going to be a movie coming out about Oppenheimer. And they were saying by Christopher Nolan. And when I heard it was Cillian Murphy, I was like, okay, perfect person. It is based on this book, American Prometheus. And again, like you said, I thought it was a well-made movie. It definitely was not boring. The only thing I was disappointed in was when they showed the Gadget blow up. Now, Gadget was the name of the bomb that blew up in New Mexico. I kind of wanted to see a little bit more oomph, but my understanding is that he didn't use any CGI. It was that was my understanding. And I did spot a mistake. I did spot a mistake when the bomb blew up. Oppenheimer was laying down. He was not sitting up watching. Now, he did have goggles, but he was not sitting up. Based on a lot of the source material I read, including if you want, like, this is a book called Now It Can Be Told. It's by Leslie Groves. Now, Leslie Groves, Matt Damon played his part. But Leslie Groves was really the man who ran the whole operation, and he put Oppenheimer on charge of the scientific portion of it. But yeah, they were all saying that everybody who was that close, especially, they were all laying down, face down, with their feet pointing towards the bomb. So that was the one mistake that I did see on that part.
Yeah, and one of the things that I appreciated is one, taking us through the making of the bomb, but also the necessity behind making the bomb. And it starts off where you have German physicists that are involved with trying to, they're working on splitting the they're splitting the atom, and that they are working towards nuclear production. And obviously this is all hindsight, right? So what has already taken place. At the time, it's a totally different thing when you're living in it. But do you think that the world powers, the people who are in power, understood that the creation of a nuclear bomb was inevitable?
I think the scientists knew it was inevitable. The scientists were saying that theoretically it can be done, but in reality, could it be done? They didn't know. I mean, it didn't happen until 1938 when two German scientists, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann, they actually were able to split the atom using neutrons. Now, the problem is that Germany in 1938 was Nazi Germany. So that caused a lot of concern. There were a lot of scientists that were highly concerned about this whole thing. They had a scientist by the name of Werner Heisenberg. Now, if you're a big Breaking Bad fan, I'm sure you've heard that name. But he led the whole nuclear program for Nazi Germany, and he was a very brilliant man. Heisenberg met with another scientist, his mentor named Niels Bohr, in Copenhagen in 1941. Now, Copenhagen at the time was already occupied by the Nazis, and Niels Bohr's, I believe he was Jewish, or his mom may have been Jewish, but Heisenberg met with Bohr's and was like, look, with the power that can be generated with a nuclear chain reaction, a bomb is going to be made. Once this thing can be made, and theoretically it could be done, But once it is done and the scientists can make it happen, then it's going to generate so much power. It's going to create an explosion like the world had never seen. And whoever can get it first and who can possess it will win the war. Because you can destroy an entire city with it. That was a theory, which turned out to be true.
Correct. Yeah.
So now, prior to that, several scientists, there was, and I know I'm going to be butchering his name, but his name was like Leo Szilard or something like that. I never could get his name right. He met with several other scientists, Enrico Fermi, and they talked with Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, and this was in 1939, warning him that, again, it's all theoretical, but if it's possible to make a nuclear bomb, they were saying that it would be possible to destroy an entire port. Now, they didn't quite really see the potential, I don't think. The hydrogen bomb, you can thank Edward Teller for that one. The hydrogen bomb came later on. A hydrogen bomb can destroy an entire city. But at the time, they weren't really thinking in terms of the hydrogen bomb. They were thinking of what uranium could do. And the uranium bomb is not as big as the hydrogen bomb. So they gave Roosevelt the warning this could happen. So Roosevelt kind of pissed his pants a bit when he heard the story, and he got some guys and he said, "Look, let's look into this. Let's get started with this." The British were already working on this, and so the story of what happened with Niels Bohr when he fled Denmark 2 years later. The Gestapo was after him, and he managed to escape to Sweden. But that was kind of a confirmation that, the Germans are working on it, but they didn't, the spy network wasn't good enough. They did not know how well or how advanced Germany was in the development of a nuclear bomb. And, there was a Boston Red Sox player that he was with the OSS, tried to kill Heisenberg in Switzerland. But the spy came to the realization after he talked with him that I don't think that they're as advanced as we feared that they were. So he didn't kill Heisenberg. But yeah,
I need to write a
I was a Boston Red Sox fan. You should. You should.
I am. Yeah.
Are you going to research what his name was? Or
yeah, exactly. I'm definitely going to look into that. That'll be a fun story. So, the idea that the bomb shouldn't have been made, or it shouldn't have been used. And it's like, well, you're sort of going against reality. As we discussed, it's like, who do you want to have make it? The Nazis, the Soviets, or the Americans, or the British, right? And you and I have discussed, and I'm sure I'm skipping ahead, but you and I have discussed, like, the Nazis and the Soviets were like buddy. They were allies for quite some time, and it's like, so to an extent, they're somewhat cut from the same cloth, right? I mean,
socialism.
It's just like, it's just like, do you really want these two murderous dictators to be in control of the most powerful weapon the world has ever seen?
Well,
that's what you're up against.
That's the thing. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah, when Poland was invaded, it wasn't just Nazi Germany. The Soviets also invaded. Granted, it was on the 17th of September. They had just finished a conflict, a little war with Japan the previous day when they were able to sign some sort of like a treaty with Japan. The very next day, September 17th, they invaded eastern Poland. And and they met and they annihilated the whole country. And the Soviets were not, and I'm talking about the government and the communists, they were not good people. Joseph Stalin didn't stop there. He also went into Finland. He invaded Finland. He invaded the three Baltic nations, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. He invaded Romania, eastern Romania. There was a little country that doesn't exist anymore. It was swallowed up by the Soviets called, I think, Tanu Tuvu or Tanu Tavu or something like that. Tannu, Tuva, I don't know. It's near Mongolia. So, and Stalin and Hitler were talking about working together to defeat Great Britain. And Great Britain was even thinking about bombing the oil fields of Baku, which was a Soviet oil refinery or oil field. So yeah, Stalin was not a good person, and Hitler was, the Soviets were not good people. And not only that, but there is something called the Katyn massacre, where the Soviets murdered about 22,000 Poles, military and civilian, because they were not communist. Just outright murdered them. So the only reason why the Soviets became our supposed friend was because Hitler stabbed them in the back and invaded them on June 22nd in 1941. Yeah. Now, the Poles, here's the thing. Poland, now all of a sudden, is now allied with the Soviets. So they're like, hey, you know all those guys, those Polish soldiers you captured when you invaded us in 1939? Why don't you release them so that they could fight with us? Well, the Soviets were like, oh, sorry, we can't. They all escaped into Manchuria. What do you mean? Where the hell are all our men? They're all gone. They escaped. We don't know what happened to them. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
The Germans,
exactly.
the Germans discovered the Katyn massacre, and they brought in the International Red Cross, and that was the end of the relationship between those two nations. So this is what the Soviet Union was, and they really were not. The communists were not people to be trusted, and so when the Manhattan Project took place, it was the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada. The Soviets were not involved. Now they did have their spies, so de facto involvement, yes, but official, no. And that was one of the things that caused a problem with Oppenheimer, because he wanted to have an international commission control future nuclear weapons. But you're right in, did we want the Soviets to have a nuclear bomb first? Yeah. Because God knows who they would have used it on. They would have used it on one of us, one of our allies.
Oh, for sure. I mean, because I think it was Patton who was like, hey, once we defeat the Germans, the Soviets are next. Like, that's who we have to go after next, right? And it's like, it's the whole, like the Godfather method of an enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like, that's all the Soviets ever were. They were never like an official friend, or they were allies technically, but we served them way more than they served us. Now, you can make the argument that the Soviets defeated the Germans because the Germans invaded with Operation Barbarossa, and they wiped out so much of the Germans. But at the same time, it's like, who was building a majority of the weapons that the Soviets were using? Well, that would be us with the Lend-Lease Act, right? So it's like, we benefited really by default by the Germans invading the Soviet Union, and it was our weapons that wound up killing so many of the Germans during that Operation Barbarossa, and then the following events after that. So it makes me wonder, like, during, and I'm sure it's in the book, and because it's in the movie, it talks about how Oppenheimer felt guilty, and I can understand, the guilt of knowing that you were the head man on putting together this project that created the nuclear bomb, the atom bomb. But do you think that that's just, I don't know, not buyer's remorse, maybe builder's remorse or something, to where it's just like it's after the fact and you see what has happened? Do you think that the guilt that he felt was misplaced or properly placed?
Well, and I've had a lot of discussions with this, with a lot of people about this very subject. Number one, I was not in his shoes, so I can't, I'm gonna judge him. I'm gonna kind of play not a devil's advocate, but an angel's advocate at this point right now, and here's why. And I'm going to highlight what President Truman, his reaction. Now, the meeting of Oppenheimer and Truman did happen, and Truman did not care for Oppenheimer. He was happy for what he did for helping win the war, but when he saw Oppenheimer's reaction, yeah, he really did think of him as some sort of a,
Crybaby.
crybaby. Okay, now why? Why is that? And Eisenhower didn't think that the use of nuclear weapons was necessary. I'm going to have to disagree with Eisenhower on this one, and here's why. Number one, Harry Truman fought in a war. He was a captain during the First World War. Now, anybody who's read about the First World War, about you read or you wrote about the battles of the Meuse-Argonne.
Yeah, the Meuse-Argonne.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was a slaughter. It was just a slaughter for our guys. It was a slaughter for the French. Anybody who participated, the Battle of the Somme, the British lost 20,000 soldiers killed on the first day. He knew what kind of a meat grinder what war was. So Truman really did not want to send our boys into Japan. Now, there have the numbers of the potential deaths that were to take place. I looked at a lot of sources. Fatalities, estimates of fatalities, not casualties, fatalities would have been about 500,000. Okay, now we had, by the time we dropped the bomb,
And that's just Allied fatalities.
That's just
not
Allied. Yeah, that's
including
Allied.
who we're going to go kill.
right now we had only lost not when I say only, we had lost 400,000 by the end of the war. 400,000 men. That today in those numbers, it's, I don't know, about maybe somewhere between 1.6 to 2.5 to 3.5 million, and if you look at the population. But the estimates were 500,000 deaths, fatalities of American and Allied soldiers. Times 2, times 3 of casualties altogether. You're talking about wounded men. The war would have lasted at least, for sure, by at least into 1946, possibly into 1947. There was also the danger that the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviets declared war on Japan only hours before the boxcar took off to drop the second bomb on August the 9th. They went for Kokura. That was actually the primary town, was Kokura, but they ended up dropping it on Nagasaki. So there was the danger of, okay, if we don't hurry up and finish the war, and we just invade, the Soviets had already taken. They were on the verge of taking all of Manchuria, and they went into Korea, and now they stopped at the 38th parallel in North Korea. We don't know how much further they would have gone. They may have invaded Japan, and then Japan would have been another Germany, where part of it was split. You'd have a Tokyo Wall over there. So now the Japanese. First of all, what you have to also remember is that we had been firebombing Japan. Now, General Curtis LeMay realized that high explosive bombs was not doing the job. So he sent our B-29s on night missions, low-level bombing using napalm incendiaries. And boy, it did the job. In one night, March the 9th and 10th, from March 9th through the 10th of 1945, 100,000 Japanese estimates were killed in Tokyo. That's just killed. Estimates, maybe injured, homeless, were about 1 million. So Japan was already getting bombed.
And we have to keep in mind that that's before the war in Europe was over. This is March of 1945. There were still, once May of 1945 and the war in Europe concluded, that freed up thousands of aircrafts, thousands of bombers. And it also freed up all of our allies to come in. And it was they would have been capable of doing round the clock bombing, like nonstop. Like we're talking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until technically there would there could have been nothing left of Japan.
Correct. And there everybody was trained to fight, not just the men, but the women, children, boys, girls, old folks. They were using bamboo sticks. They were using any type of sharp, blunt instruments. The goal was that every single able-bodied person, from a child to an old man, had to kill 10 enemy personnel and 10 enemy soldiers. That was their goal. Yeah, and you had to do it for the emperor. They were not going to quit. Now, if the Germans, as our guys got closer and closer into Germany, the Germans were giving up in mass. That wasn't the case with the Japanese. The closer we got to Japan, the worse it got. The more stubborn and determined they were. Iwo Jima, we lost what, it was 8,000, I think. I hope I'm getting the right. I didn't look. 8,000, I think. 8,000 Americans killed. 6,000 to 8,000 Americans killed on Iwo Jima. 21,000 Japanese killed. In Okinawa, we lost about 12,000 men. The Japanese lost, I don't know if it was like 120,000 soldiers and that many civilians, or altogether it was over. But they definitely lost over 120,000 people because they refused to quit. Peleliu, Saipan, everywhere our guys went, it just was a bloody massacre.
And we have to understand, like, they weren't just fighting for Japan and for the emperor as a man. Like, once the war in Japan ended, Hirohito, the emperor, when he announced, hey, to the public over a broadcast, that was the first time that the emperor had ever spoken to the public. And it was because he was considered a deity. And I think it was January 1st, 1946, like the following year, once American occupation was underway, he had his Declaration of Humanity saying, hey, I'm not a god, I'm not a deity, and it is not the fate of the Japanese to conquer the world. And so it's more than just, they're fighting for their homeland. Like, no, they're fighting for what they believe to be a god. Like, the emperor was considered a deity, and it was their destiny to conquer the world. And so it's like, if you're going in with that mentality, and this is not a mentality that's only like a few decades old. This is going back far into history. And so people truly, deeply believed that, which is why you had women and children and old men preparing to die with sticks in their hands, in front of tanks, in front of whatever type of, guns and machine guns. It doesn't matter. They're going to charge. It's like the slaughter. It's the whole book of Revelation type of thing where the blood reaches the horse's bridle. Like, you want to see that. Like, that is what would have happened.
You saw the movie American Sniper?
Yeah.
Okay. You remember at the beginning where that mother hands that grenade, the RPG grenade or whatever it was, the bomb.
Yeah.
Gave it to her child, and the child ran up there, and that's times that by I don't know how many Japanese people there were, about 100 million. I'm not sure what the number was, but so there were estimates that there would be 10 million dead Japanese, and then a lot of them would have starved. So now the goal for the Japanese, if the U.S. and our allies invaded, the goal was to create so much carnage that we would not demand an unconditional. They knew they weren't going to win, but what their thinking was, instead of unconditional surrender, we can force the Allies to sue for peace in some method, kind of like how the War of 1812 was, where they called it the status quo antebellum, which is, let's just return to the state before the war existed. So. Yeah. So that's what their goal was. They didn't want any American soldiers on their country, on their soil. They would keep their government. It would just be okay. We're going to stop the fighting. We'll So that was their stated goal.
And it's like, no, that's not good enough. Like you started this with us, right? You brought us into this war. And there's that's the thing is
They don't forget about what they did to China.
that's what I was going to bring up. It's like people so often, because I wrote an article. I know you wrote an article on sort of about the Oppenheimer movie for the Epoch Times, and I encourage people to read it. And I also wrote an article, and people were commenting. Some of them agreeing, and then a number of them like not agreeing and saying like the nuclear, the atom bomb should have never been made, and it was wicked and evil and stuff like that. It's like there's for some people out there, there's a real lack of perspective and historical perspective. And just in this sort of this microcosm of time in the middle of the 20th century on what was going on. And it's like, and we had Barrett Tillman on, I think, last year to discuss the dropping of the atom bomb. And it's like the idea of dropping the atom bomb on the Nazis probably wouldn't get the pushback that exists today from dropping the bomb on the Japanese.
Wait. What do you mean by that?
Because the Nazis are sort of this, they are evil incarnate, right? And the Japanese, for as bad as they were, on par with the Germans, with the Nazis, but they're sort of put into a different category for some reason. You know what I'm saying? Like the Nazis are known, like just think about it with the movies. Like how many movies do you see where the villains are the Japanese, like the Imperial Japanese?
Well,
You don't hardly see that.
how many?
Now the Nazis and the Soviets, yeah. But the thing is, like, I don't think there would be the pushback if the bomb had been dropped on the Nazis. I don't think so.
There's always a controversy. Clint Eastwood made that movie. I think Letters of Iwo Jima, I think is what it was. Is that the right one? I know there was Flags
Yeah,
of Our
Letters of
Father.
Iwo
I think
Jima
it's
and
called-
Flags of Our Fathers.
Yeah, Letters of Iwo Jima, and it had the Japanese perspective. And the commander was actually a pretty decent guy, the commander on Iwo Jima. But imagine, there was a movie that came out in the 50s called The Young Lions, and it had Marlon Brando, Dean Martin, and Cliff Robertson. Now, Marlon Brando was playing I don't know if he was a Nazi, but he was definitely a German soldier. And there was a lot of controversy because it made him look like a pretty decent man. And they're like, how dare you make a movie where, someone in the German army is looked with sympathy.
Right.
When
And
Clint
that's what
Eastwood,
I'm saying.
made
Yeah.
that movie, the Letters of Iwo Jima, I don't think you could make a movie like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think you could make a movie like that so much when it comes to the Germans from that
No.
time period. Now they did.
And that's
They
what
did in the day.
that's my point is there's a separation there. And I think and you mentioned China, the rape of Nanking, like the things that were being done by the Japanese they're so horrific. And yet, and I think a lot of it has to do with the exposure, right? It hasn't been the crimes and the things that the Japanese soldiers did have not been exposed near to the extent of what the Nazis have done. And in large case, you can thank the Holocaust Museum Society, like that whole group that really continues to push. And then you can also thank Hollywood. Hollywood continues to push about the wickedness and the evil of the Nazis, as they should. But you don't see that with the Japanese. And I'm not trying to take and I'm not trying to sort of cut off an entire group of people in the world. But what I'm saying is we have to have that historical perspective of how truly bad the Japanese were, the Imperial Japanese were during and before the start of World War II. And technically, as we discussed prior in another episode, technically World War II started with Japan and China. I mean, so You
I'm
just
gonna
have to
go
have
on the. I'm
the
gonna
proper perspective.
go ahead. Well, go ahead.
I'm just saying you really have to have the proper perspective, and I think it will change the notion of was it necessary to drop the bomb on Japan?
Well, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I met 5 men who were on those 2 missions. Tom Farabee and Dutch Van Kirk on the Enola Gay. Now, Dutch Van Kirk was the navigator, and Tom Farabee was the bombardier. He was the guy that actually released the bomb over Hiroshima. And then there was Don Albury and Fred Olivey. They were on the I think one of them, Albury, was on the Great Artiste, but they were during the Hiroshima bombing, but they were both on the boxcar for Nagasaki. And then there was a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Russell Gackenbach. Now, he was a navigator on both missions, Necessary Evil and the Enola Gay, on the 2 different missions. My understanding is the famous pictures that you see of the mushroom cloud, he's the one who took them. So I got to meet all 5 of them. And I asked them, what are your thoughts? Was it a mistake? All 5 of them said the same thing. I have absolutely no problem with what we did. They didn't lose any sleep over it. They thought it was a necessary mission. They knew what was going on, unlike the armchair quarterbacks we have today. And I'm going to say this even regarding Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was not in combat. Eisenhower, I don't think Eisenhower ever served in combat.
No, he didn't.
Never fought. So, yeah, naturally, Eisenhower.
And that's not a slight. That's not a slight on him.
No.
That's not a slight on him.
And listen, hey, look, I didn't, I tried to serve after 9/11, but that's a different story. But I did not serve in combat duty, so therefore, I'm not going to criticize Eisenhower or anyone who has served.
Likewise.
I'm only echoing what the guys who actually fought. I'm echoing their voices. And they would have said, you were not there. You did not see my best friend getting blown apart by soldiers on the other side who half the time were pretty decent people themselves. I mean, you interview some of the soldiers who fought, like Easy Company. They said, that other guy who was in the foxhole is probably someone I'd go hunting or fishing with. But thanks to our governments, we're killing each other. Although with the Japanese, they were a little fanatic. And I think the Japanese were a little bit more fanatic than the Nazis were. I hate to say that, but, man, they did some nasty stuff.
They did some nasty stuff, and talk about like just charging in front of just mindless, in a lot of ways, just mindlessly like running towards machine gun nests and all. It's just like,
well, I mean, if you were captured by the Germans, okay, they respected. I think they honored the Geneva Convention, but the Japanese did not. What? If you watch the movie Bridge on the River Kwai, that part of that was true, but part of it they kind of put us little, made it look a little bit nicer. But I was at the Railway Man. I believe I told you about that story. The Japanese, you did not want to get captured by the Japanese. Absolutely.
No, you didn't want to get captured by the Japanese. But I mean, if you were like a Jewish American, you definitely didn't want to get captured by the Nazis.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you could get away with saying that your name was Smith or or Bass.
Doesn't always work out, right? And if you were a Soviet,
if you were,
didn't want to get captured by the
I mean,
Nazis
listen.
either.
I'm not to take anything away. I mean, they did some pretty messed up stuff. I'm talking about the soldiers, our military guys. But with the Japanese, regardless of whether you were military or civilian or whatever, you did not want to be captured by them because they treated everybody harshly. They did not believe in the Geneva Convention. They had that Bushido code or whatever you call it, where you really should die rather than surrender. Because if you surrender, you're a coward. You're less than zero. So look. I saw the criticism of people. People were saying, poor Oppenheimer, the remorse that he felt. look, I realize that, and again, not to take anything away from him, that's part of the reason why he lost his security clearance. He was against the hydrogen bomb. Edward Teller had to. You can see Edward Teller was in the movie. He's the one that ran with the whole hydrogen bomb concept, but he did not want the hydrogen bomb developed, especially in any type of combat roles. His wife was a communist. His brother was a communist. His mistress, who killed herself, was a communist. His friends and associates at Berkeley were communists. I mean, even Leslie Groves was like, I don't know if I would give him his security clearance today. During World War II, yes, the Soviets were our supposed allies, but again, Oppenheimer, had he served in a combat role and saw the carnage and what would end up happening to our men had we invaded Japan. Now, some people will sit and say, the Soviet involvement in the war would have that Japan surrendered because of the Soviets. I call bullshit on that. Part of it is because when Hirohito gave the surrender speech, he didn't mention the Soviets. He mentioned the cruel weapon that the Americans had created, number one. Number two, even though we had dropped the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, there were a lot of Japanese that tried to conduct a coup on before Hirohito gave the speech. They were determined, we're not going to surrender. But Hirohito just didn't want to see his country destroyed any longer.
Right, and it was his war council, known as the Big Six, who were split evenly on whether to surrender or continue the war. And so he was the sort of the seventh dividing, final, the seventh vote that finalized and said, we got to get out of this. The city's on fire. Tokyo, your biggest city, your capital city, is on fire, right? It's like you got to call it a day. But yeah, I mean, the Oppenheimer was surrounded by communists. He had, communist leaning sympathies. And it's like, well, that was an odd time because there were a lot of people who, it's sort of that whole outside looking in. And I sort of parallel it a little bit with today, where people can tell you, and let's say that they're on the other side of the political aisle, and they can tell you what your political affiliation or your political party is doing wrong, negatively, and you won't believe it, right? And they can even present you with information that makes their point, and you still will not believe it. Now go back 70, 80 years when information was not as readily available, and I almost say not as reliable, but I mean, how reliable is our information today? But you are going off of what communism was purported to be, which was, hey, we are more or less taking from the rich and giving to the poor, and we're trying to uplift and create equality, right? The message has always appealed to what I would consider idealists, people who are sort of naive about reality and human nature. But it's always been something that is easily preached and easily, I guess, swallowed. I mean, people just take it, and especially like today, and you see it in like the younger generation. But you have people who had these communist sympathies who probably didn't know. They probably heard, hey, have you not heard about the decisions from just an economic perspective that is creating famines, and how they went about killing, whoever? And it's just like, do you believe it? Do you not believe it? And to an extent, I put myself in the shoes of the people that are listening.
Well, Dr. Jordan Peterson was saying that everybody knows about the Nazi concentration camps, but nobody knows about the gulags. Nobody knows about the kulaks. If you read about the kulaks, the farmers of the Soviet Union, if you read about the peasant farmers of the Ukraine who did not want to submit to the authorities and collectivize all their farms, read about that but people don't know about it. They all know about the Holocaust.
Right.
And they don't know that Nazism, sorry people, I know there's some people who don't like me saying this. Nazism was socialism. It was a different type of socialism. It was all part
Right.
of the socialism umbrella.
Yeah.
It was whereas communism was international socialism, national socialism was the economics was socialism, but it was more based on a master race, like, the Aryan people. Go ahead. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to get on my little.
No. You're fine. I forgot what I was saying anyway, so it's not that important.
Now you're talking about like the idealists, students, and all that who weren't really familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and we know that our current generation, and just to sort of wrap up the show, but our current generation is dealing with historical illiteracy, right? And to your point, like what they know is more or less what they consume via entertainment. The clips on Instagram, movies from Hollywood. And it's like, and that sort of goes back to my point about the push by Hollywood about the Nazis, right? The Nazis, the Nazis, the Nazis. And yes, I completely agree. I applaud it. And we need to continue to make sure that people know and the future generations know how bad the Nazis were, what they did, the capacity for wickedness in humans and human nature, so that you don't feel that you are above those who came before us. And that's another thing that Peterson brought up. Like, people always say, oh, I would never do this. I would never be involved with the Nazis, and I would never go along with it just to get along, just to survive. And he's like, no, you more than likely, far more than likely would. There's very little chance that you would actually stand up to the behemoth of the Nazi party, right?
Well, look at the pandemic that we've had.
I was going to say, look at what happened here.
Yeah.
I mean, there were people going out of their way to report on people, to shut people's businesses down, to more or less try to move them into a mode of starvation or complete reliance on the government, right? It's like, you want their businesses shut down. You want them thrown in jail. Because you've been convinced that something wrong is actually right. And that's what I'm saying is, like, people who fell for communism back in those days, I give a little bit of leniency there, because it's like, what did they know and what did they believe? What was presented to them? It's one thing to have a Joseph McCarthy running around, and doing this, the Red Scare type of thing and scare tactics or whatever. It's one thing to have that and then get that blown out of proportion. But it's another thing to, like, just sit down and be like, hey, here's what's really going on in the Soviet Union. Here's what's really going in these, in the Soviet bloc, where people are starving, or maybe they're eating, but they're not eating well. And it's a really pre-planned meal and nobody has freedom. And they're like, yeah, but everybody has a place to stay. Well, it's like, yeah, but they're all stacked on top of each other. So anyways,
Yeah,
I say all that to say
Dr.
this.
Zhivago, where they all pile into his home.
Correct. And that's exactly what was going on. But you and I have discussed prior episodes about how many sort of anti-communist movies like a Dr. Zhivago there are. And to an extent, you can almost count on like one hand or two hands. It's just like, there are so few out there that actually let you know, like, here was the results of communism.
I don't know. Yeah, I think Dr. Zhivago. I mean, there hasn't been any movies. Solzhenitsyn. I don't think there's any movies that from the. I read one of his books. I didn't get a chance to read Gulag Archipelago because it's 3 books altogether. You have to read all 3 of them.
Yeah, I have the condensed version, but
Yeah, what, the Cliff Notes?
right, exactly.
I mean, but there's not very many. If I can't think of any that were anti-communist.
Yeah.
Is there any movie about what happened in Berlin in 40? The Berlin Wall and the. What was it? There's that one movie that Disney came out with about the hot air balloon where they escaped. That guy that had the alien come out of his chest. He played Kane from
Yeah, yeah,
Alien,
yeah, yeah.
whatever that guy's name is.
Yeah, John something, I think.
Yeah, he was in. Yeah, he did a. There was a Disney movie, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but
Right. I mean, but other than like the James Bond movies, there's not a whole lot of
no.
sort of your anti-communist movies. I mean, I saw one not too long ago called Mr. Jones. That was a very good film.
Was it anti-communist?
Yeah, it was. It's based on a true story about this reporter who goes in to try to. He had interviewed Adolf Hitler, and then he wanted to follow up with an interview with Joseph Stalin because, Stalin, they were lying about their economic production and saying, how much they were producing when in fact they really weren't. And Ukraine was actually undergoing a massive famine where hundreds of thousands were dying of starvation. And so he goes over to the Soviet Union to do a firsthand account. He wants to interview Stalin, but that winds up not happening. Well, he ends up doing a firsthand account and exposing what was going on. And you have a moment where he's back in, I want to say, back in London, and he's expressing what's going on, and people didn't want to believe him. So it's.
But because they don't talk about it. I mean, there's not been an anti-Mao movie. There hasn't been an anti-Castro movie.
Exactly.
I mean, you go down the list of all the. Has there been a movie about the Hungarian Revolution of '56, Czechoslovakia of '68?
There's so much material out there that doesn't get pushed, and I believe that it's primarily because Hollywood.
And don't forget the journalists, so-called journalists.
Well, your journalists, your artists, they all are, more or less, they have these leftward leaning sympathies, and they don't want to expose perhaps what they sort of adhere to as being completely evil.
Indiana Jones, the fourth Indiana Jones, and there was controversy because they didn't like the fact that they made the Soviets look bad. That was. I didn't see the fifth one. I think that's probably a stupid one, but
so it's a very, it's a very strange thing that communism and socialism continues to get protected by people with influential voices, and that's sort of the state of reality that we are in. I don't get it. I don't like it, and I think that what we see in schools, specifically universities, I think that sort of shows you where we are, and hopefully, just you get the word out and be like, look, just abandon that whole idea of communism and socialism.
Weren't we talking about Oppenheimer? How did we get to this subject?
Well, I think this is like Oppenheimer eventually gets to communism because that's where he winds up and loses his access.
Yeah.
Right. Because his communist sympathies and his communist connections. Whether out of ignorance or naivete or, hey, I'm not going to sell out my friends because they're communists and they have a different belief system or view than I do. I respect that aspect, but at the same time, like once you have to let it go.
I have a friend who's a communist. I've known him since high school. So I don't know. He was a good guy back in the day. I don't know. I mean, he's still a good guy, but damn,
Yeah, it's really bizarre to me that, a complete, like, this isn't just like an economic theory that, hasn't been used before, or like it's an economic theory that, is still being, worked out or whatever. But no, this has been done and the results have been absolutely catastrophic. Arguably 100 million people have either died from starvation, disease, execution, imprisonment. It's not worked out well for really anybody except the super powerful and those who don't mind bending over backwards and forwards to remain in power or not be killed by those in power. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
I know.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to bring our first episode of the 6th season to a close. Alan, if you've got like 30 seconds left of something you wanted to say.
Yeah, the apple story. Yeah, the part of the apple where he poisoned the apple, that was true. That was a true story.
That's wild.
So, yeah. But, yeah, go watch Oppenheimer. But before you watch Oppenheimer, read my article on the Epoch Times about the Manhattan Project. I think you'll learn something, and you'll get a better understanding before you go see the movie.
I stand corrected. We'll have the link in the description, so you can check that out. You can also check out my article as well, but definitely read Alan's. And then if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, do go see it. I think you will enjoy it.
And go to the White Sands Missile Range. It's either the 1st or 3rd Saturday of October. Otherwise you'll have to wait till April. And you can go to the actual spot, the Trinity site, where the bomb blew up. And so although I'm sure it's going to be crowded, but thankfully I visited the last time before they filmed or they released the movie. So
beautiful. Well, next week I'm very excited about the guest that we're scheduled to have, Julian Jackson. He's a British historian. He's actually a fellow of the British Academy and the Royal Historical Society. Speaking of World War II, he specializes in sort of the Vichy France. I recently read his latest book, France on Trial. It's about the trial of Marshal Patton, right?
yeah, Patton.
So it's a very good book. So if you haven't read that, he also wrote the De Gaulle, I think it came out about 10, 12 years ago, a biography on De Gaulle, which is now, I think, like the standard for De Gaulle biographies. So we're very excited to have him. So make sure you join us. And once again, subscribe wherever you're listening. Follow us on social media. And Alan, it was great to get back with you. Wonderful conversation. I will see you later, everyone. You want to say goodbye, Alan?
No.
Say goodbye. Never say goodbye.
I wanted to mention real quick. My parents were actually born in Vichy territory.
Is that so?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting to bring up to him.
It's Lebanon today. Now it's still part of the French Levant or the French Syrian Mandate or French Lebanon, whatever you wanted to call it. But,
yeah, like I said, you can bring that up to him next week.
yeah. So then I'm going to say au revoir. How's that?
Okay, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Salute.
Marshal Patton. You will not pass. They shall not pass. That was Robert Neville. He was.
I thought that was Gandalf.
Yeah, Gandalf.
Anyways,
Gandalf said that, but what's his name got that?
See you later.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful week.
Yeah, you too, man.